we are confronted with two terms. There is Indian knowledge systems and there is Indian knowledge traditions. So what is the difference between the two?
Okay, so this is a very good question because some people use Indian knowledge tradition, as you say. Some people use the word Indian knowledge system and so on. So let me little bit define IKS, which would partly answer the question that you are asking. See, when we actually set on this journey, obviously, if you have to write a book on Indian knowledge system, it's very important that we first define it. Otherwise, it's going to be a bit of an issue, problem for people to comprehend in a certain way. So, as you see here, there are three terms here: Indian, knowledge, and system. So, first of all, we said when you say Indian, we had two important considerations in our mind. The first thing is it is anything to do with Akhanda Bharat, not the political formation after 1947, because that's only a convenient thing that happened 75 years back. So, moment you say Indian, our understanding was it could be that body of knowledge that we have synthesized right from Kandahar, Afghanistan on one side to even Far East on the other side, and of course it runs from the Himalayas to the Setu and the Cape Comorin and so on. So first, Indian means Akhanda Bharat. The second definition of Indian, which we took to ourselves after reading a bit of different words, we realized all those who have lived in this country for a substantive period of time, have imbibed the culture, have lived through it, and only such works we call it as Indian. Because there are quite a few foreigners who have picked up the book, done their own translations in all their genuinity, but what we realize is unless you are part of the culture, sometimes you may miss out things. So that's another scoping. So these are the two things about Indian. Then comes the knowledge. That's where your question comes in terms of what the difference between a tradition and a system. So what we realized is, moment you say knowledge, knowledge is always implicit. It's not tacit. Knowledge is always implicit. It happens in somebody's mind. There is a reflection, there is a synthesis, there is a certain kind of internalization. All that happens. Knowledge in pure form is always tacit. But then when it gets explicit, it gets into two forms. One is in a literary form, where it can be documented even in a oral form, or in a form of a palm leaf scripts, or in today's terms, we have a proper literary books and literature and so on. So that's one kind of a component of knowledge. But there's a second kind of a component of knowledge which is hugely oral, which is hugely in terms of practices. It is very much part of the society. You have rich health tradition, for example. You have art forms, you have certain unique practices. All these are not written down, but they are also knowledge at the end of the day. So therefore, if you ask me what is Indian knowledge system and Indian knowledge tradition, things which can be managed in a sort of a literary kind of a framework can be broadly called as a knowledge system, because one can still put it in a structured way, look at it and all that kind of things. Whereas the largest scheme of knowledge, which are tacit, which are passed on by practices and oral traditions and so on, that is knowledge tradition. So knowledge tradition is much larger. Knowledge system can be a part of it, which is in a, I would say, in a structured, literary kind of a framework. And then the system part, the third definition is the system part. So what we mean by system, at least for the purpose of the book, is a way by which you can very nicely organize it. The knowledge is so vast. You have to put it in a way which is easily comprehensible, which is exhaustive in its own way. It is interconnected in a structured way, and so on. So that is what I call it as system. So that's how perhaps I will define an Indian knowledge system and the Indian knowledge tradition.
So, Professor Mahadevan, can we say that the system is inherent in the tradition?
Absolutely. Yeah. A certain abstraction of the tradition in a more formal sense could be thought of as a system. That's one way we look at it.